Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Dungeons & Dragons can be super awesome when everyone at the table is friendly and down to earth. Unfortunately, sometimes people will run into someone that is kind of cringe or just plain crazy, as is the case in these next 3 D&D horror stories. But first, I just wanted to say that liking the video and commenting can go a long way to help this Doge out. Not only does it help the channel to grow, but it also keeps the algorithm dragon at bay and not have a side of Doge with his next meal. But with that out of the way, let's get right into the stories. Dude goes from vaguely murder hobo to actual serial killer vibes, by Reddit user JimBaby. Once upon a time, when I was doing study abroad in college, I joined my new school's tabletop society. I'd been playing D&D and Pathfinder for nearly a decade, so I thought this would be a good way to make friends. I wasn't the only girl in the club, but there certainly weren't a lot of us, and I ended up being the only girl in the regular group I played with. Most of the dudes were your stereotypical awkward nerd type, but they were good guys, and after we started playing, and they saw I knew what I was doing, they accepted me as one of them. The club met 3 times a week, and we'd play tabletop RPGs until the wee hours of the morning. I still have great memories of that year, and the people I hung out with. And then there's that guy. That guy played a goblin alchemist. There were a lot of us at the table, so things could get pretty chaotic pretty fast, but we still managed to build bonds between our characters. That guy, at first, was really friendly and outgoing, and his characters were really funny. Goblin alchemist especially would always turn the session on its head, which was fine because none of us were taking it that serious anyway. He attached himself to my fighter character pretty quickly. I was cool with that because alchemist players seemed chill and had a comfortable dynamic with the group. I met up with these guys 3 days a week for months. We really got to know each other. That guy and I became good friends. We even started to hang out outside of club meetings because I was a foreigner and he offered to show me around the city. I never felt weird or awkward around him until one day, 3 months before I'm set to fly home, that guy confesses that he had feelings for me and wanted to be in a relationship. You need to know, reader, for context, I am one of the most oblivious people on the planet. Any and all signals that this was coming went totally over my head. I was blindsided and apologetic because I didn't feel the same way. I tried to let him down easy. I told him that I had thought he was a great person, but I wasn't really looking for a relationship, especially since I was going to be flying back home to my country in a pretty short time. It didn't make sense for me to start something I knew would have to stop. He was upset, which I understood, and I told him that I valued our friendship, and offered to give him space. He said no, it was okay. Obviously, he needed some time, but he didn't want me to feel like I couldn't hang out with our other friends. It would be fine. It was not fine. At first, club meetings were a little awkward, because his character wasn't buddying up to mine like he usually did. I figured that would happen, and I wasn't surprised by it, so I tried to go on like normal. Over time, Alchemist player became more animated again, and started getting back into her old shenanigans of sowing Pathfinder chaos. And then things started getting uncomfy. My character rescued a young elf from a bad situation, its own very silly story that I will skip, and the DM allowed me to bring the elf along as sort of my sidekick. Alchemist insisted on interacting with the elf as well, treating him very affectionately, and insisting that his character and mine were co-parenting the NPC. No one else seemed to take this very seriously, so I didn't either. In-game relationships don't reflect real-life ones after all. But then Alchemist started to get very possessive of my character, and the players started texting me late at night on days that we weren't playing. He'd say he missed me, or talked about how sad he was that I didn't want to date him, and how badly it was affecting his mental health. I was smart enough to know that he was trying to guilt me into going out with him, but apparently too stupid to just cut him out of my life. Regardless, I didn't bite, and told him that if his mental health was really that bad, that he should go speak to a therapist or a counselor. Our school even had some on staff, but that wasn't the answer he wanted, so he would always just back off. Until a few days later where he'd text me again, and we'd go through the whole song and dance once more. At club meetings, I tried to stay casual, because I didn't want to drag all the other guys in the group in on the drama. We were all adults. We could be friendly and mature around each other, right? As far as I knew, none of them were aware of what that guy was saying to me behind the scenes. Then, one fateful night, their paradigm was shifted. Another guy in the group, we'll call him Rogue, came over to our table before the game started when everyone was just chatting and goofing off. Rogue was probably one of the only humans more blind to nonverbal cues than I was. One of his characters was literally poisoned by another member of the party, who poured the poison in his drink right in front of him. But the player was playing a phone game at the time and wasn't paying attention. Anyway, Rogue comes over to the table and slides right on up to Alchemist and says just loud enough for us all to hear, quote, "Hey, I heard you got a crush on the redhead in the club." The table went dead silent. There were only 2 redheads in the club, one of which was of course me. To be fair, the other one was another very sweet, pretty girl, who it could have been. I could tell from the blissfully unaware look on Rogue's face that his head was empty of all thoughts and implications of what he just said. However, I could also tell that every other one of the guys present knew exactly who Alchemist had a crush on. I could also tell that none of them knew that I was aware of it. It was painfully awkward, and in a strange way, funny moment. Alchemist somehow managed to not answer Rogue's question, and everyone else rushed to start the game so that they had an excuse to not talk about it. But somehow, that moment cracked open Pandora's box of cringy behavior. Alchemist's possessiveness started to bleed out of character. While that guy was still chipper and outgoing to everyone else, there was now a sharper edge to his jokes. He started being a dick to the other guys I was friends with, but he played it off like it was a joke. The texts about how I was ruining his life by not dating him were still coming fast and strong. Eventually, even my idiotic self had had enough. I told him, firmly, that I was never going to be in a relationship with him, and his behavior made it so I didn't even want to remain friends with him. Should I have continued going back to games with him after that? No, probably not. But the siren song of friendship and tabletop RPGs was too strong. The breaking point came, one literal, dark and stormy night. We were taking a pizza break from the game and all just goofing off. I was talking to the orc barbarian, I think commiserating that he would have to ride his bike home after this in the rain. I made some joke. I don't remember what about, but that guy's loud and manic laughter will be forever imprinted on my brain. I legitimately didn't recognize him when I looked at his face. His smile was so weird, and his eyes were so bugged out. Still laughing like it was a joke, he said that I would probably like him more if I skinned Barbarian alive and wore his skin like a suit. I did not know what to say to that. I don't think anyone knew what to say to that. Rogue, bless him, looked up from his phone and asked if there was any pizza left. That night, I noped out of the game early, and I was looking over my shoulder the whole bus ride back to my dorm. I blocked that guy's number and told DM that I was not coming back to any game he was playing in. DM said, quote, "Yeah, that's fair." Thankfully for me, that guy stopped coming around to club meetings as much after that. My game nights went from 3 to 2 a week, which was unfortunate, but not long after that incident the school year ended and I flew back home. Over time, I lost touch with my friends from the tabletop club, but thankfully, last I heard, no one had been turned into a skin suit. Sadly to say, this isn't the last time something like this would happen to me, but it was by far the most deranged. TLDR, a sort of chaotic but friendly fellow player admits he has a crush on me, and after getting rejected, threatens to go Buffalo Bill on another player to win my affections. Yet another story involving hardcore simpage. There is nothing more cringy than someone who is told no when it comes to entering a possible relationship and then groveling and trying to guilt someone into it, especially when they act like a lunatic after a while. I don't blame OP for looking over her shoulder on that bus ride home, as that certainly sounded like that guy was a bit unhinged at the end. Thankfully, it sounds like she is now an ocean away from that guy, and like she said, hopefully he didn't Wild Bill anyone. On to the next story. Gaslighting Player by Reddit user Habby Deactivated. I am a forever GM, running Powered by the Apocalypse games, mostly Monster of the Week. In this instance, however, I was actually running a hack of Monster of the Week I made myself, where the PCs are all demigods. We are about 5 or 6 sessions in with my original players. Moon, my best friend, Sky, a good friend of mine who is in many of my games, and Chaos, a very cool guy I'd never played with before this campaign, when we decided we might want a fourth player. I put up an ad on a server we're all in, and Shadow sends me a message. Now, I was already on edge here because I had a bad experience with Shadow in another game, but I believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt. Plus the other game had been a play-by-post, which is rough. So I went over the game rules with her and she made a character. Awesome. Immediately upon starting, there were difficulties. Her character was absolutely the "I'm better than the rest of these player characters" type, refusing to join in on team activities, actively abandoning her teammates when her help was needed, and even reacting positively when her poor roll caused another PC to take damage, gleefully exclaiming, quote, "There's no consequences." She also refused to ever heal anyone despite being one of the better healers. She also reacted poorly toward NPCs. This being a demigod game where they are actively serving the gods, they have a lot of interaction with them. The other players recognize what was written in the rulebook. Gods are more powerful than you, and you better have a damn good plan if you want to defeat them. Shadow was hostile to nearly every god she met, except her character's mother, who she called Mommy, and practically broke down sobbing whenever they had to talk. And also Thanatos, who she had a huge Hades game-based crush on, despite being a lesbian, both in character and out of character. She threw herself at him at every opportunity and called him Fatty. With every male NPC, Shadow suggested executing him, or at the very least using him as bait. Women got off slightly easier, with Shadow demanding to know if they were hot. If they were, she would immediately start flirting, a gambit that at one point included the phrase, quote, "Mommy issues are hot." If the women were not hot, or worse, if they turned down her flirting, execute them, same as the men. Shadow also liked to tell jokes. Most of these jokes were just straight up insults to the other players, or characters, or threats to murder or screw over her party members. She also at one point started flirting with Sky's character. Sky was confused and asked, "Wait, isn't your character a lesbian?" Shadow agreed and said that Sky's character must be a girl, because she was attracted to him. It should be noted at this point that every player in this game, Shadow included, is trans. At least two of the characters, Skies included, are also trans. We pointed out that it was super rude to say someone was wrong about their own gender, just because you're attracted to them. She laughed and said, quote, "Stop being so sensitive. God, I hope he isn't trans." Upon being told he was, she laughed harder and doubled down, saying he didn't pass well enough. Aside from that awful moment, there was another where I momentarily forgot her godly parent's name. She was the newest player and didn't pick a particularly common god. No problem, but I don't have a photographic memory. I remembered and said the name. Shadow immediately got furious, saying how dare I forget her mother's name. I always prioritized the other players over her. It was clear I didn't care. Mortified, I checked her character sheet. I had the name right. I said as much and she laughed and said, quote, "Haha, I know, I was just gaslighting you." Very funny. The whole thing came to a climax when one of our players came down with COVID and said they couldn't make a session. I told them not to worry about it, and that I'd postponed the session. Shadow starts passively aggressively talking about how I made her cancel a date to play. Not true, I literally told her not to and that I'd reschedule. She chose to cancel the date. I told her it was in poor taste to talk like that when someone literally has COVID, and told her that I did not think she fit in the game. That's when she blows up on me in DMs, and reveals a nightmarish truth about the last session. See, in the last session, she had been distant, only ever really participating after being called on once or twice, and having no idea what had happened while she was gone. We believed her excuse, she was helping her grandmother around the house. This, as it turns out, was a lie. In reality, she was hanging out with a friend, and in between her turns, her friend was listening in on her headphones, without the knowledge or permission of the other players in the game. The purpose of this was to show her friend how bad we treated her. Not sure they could see that at all, given she was literally not participating. Also in DMs, she said we never included her in group activities. Remember those activities she actively ran from in the game? I punished her for failure too harshly, treated her exactly the same as other players. And the worst sin of all, we never laughed at her jokes. You know, the jokes that were insults, threats, transphobia, or gaslighting. She also claimed we were an extremely tight-knit group of friends and she felt excluded, which honestly felt pretty good to hear. The friends thing, not the exclusion thing. Again, we tried to invite her. Me and Chaos have become much closer friends since this incident. I kicked her and explained the situation to my players by showing them her messages, which she explicitly told me to do, so no breach of privacy here. They were all horrified and glad she was gone. I no longer dread GMing this game. TLDR, player is a transphobic gaslighting edgelord and is so mad that we don't laugh at her jokes, that she has someone spy on us, gets kicked and throws a tantrum. Holy shit. First off, why would you want to play in a game that requires cooperation, only to make a character that doesn't participate with the rest of the group, and then be gleeful when another player needed healing and not healing them? Not to mention the inappropriate jokes and getting mad when no one laughed. And then to have someone listen in on the game without people knowing, just to stroke your own ego by trying to play the victim, and then being upset when you're kicked for it. Honestly, this person just kinda sounds like a piece of shit. Though, what are your thoughts? Next story. My DM cursed me 'cause I'm gay, by Reddit user KRCG88. In high school, I had always really wanted to try D&D. In my junior year, I finally got the chance. A friend of mine mentioned that her boyfriend was starting a campaign and looking for players. I immediately jumped on it, and I was so excited. Our first session was after school a couple of days later. I had been prepped by another friend of mine for what to expect. I was expecting some version of a Session 0. Nope. He walked in and handed everyone a character sheet he had made based on everyone's personalities. I was a fairy cleric. Turns out I was the linchpin for his story. As the fairy princess of the land, the rest of the party had been captured trespassing in our forest. As punishment, they must accompany me on a quest that I must perform to become the queen. I was surprised because there was no Session 0. There was no character creation. My character was a lesbian female despite me being a gay man, and I was most confused about the setup. Why would I take these people on this quest to recover an ancient artifact to prove my worthiness as a queen? Side note, I only had to prove my worth because my character was a lesbian and had chosen a female lover already. I decided to roll with it, and Session 1 was okay. I mean, it was fun, but I was still trying to grasp what was going on. That's actually how the first 3 sessions went until a couple days before Session 4, when my friend broke up with my DM. When we sat down for the 4th session, we were suddenly at the end of my quest. As we walked out of a tavern, I saw the artifact, an enchanted mace, was being held by a statue in the town square. One of the other PCs destroyed the hand of the statue, leaving my artifact sitting on the ground. All I had to do now was pick it up and go home. End campaign. Wrong. The mace was enchanted, so I couldn't take any damage. I mean, literally none. I was suspicious, and that's when he told me it was cursed, because I had not been deemed yet worthy. What is the curse, you ask? It was a curse of weight. My new mace was always required +1 strength from what I have to be able to wield, but I also can't put it down. Naturally, my character knew what to do next. I must travel to the Fey Fountain in the far forest, and by Fey law, that means you're all coming with me. That is when hell began. I tried for 2 sessions to die. I walked into lava dragging my mace with me. I was immune. I walked underwater to try to drown. I can't drown. I jumped off a cliff. I don't take fall damage, but the monsters below me do. At the end of the 2nd session of my undamaged life, I asked him why he was picking on me like that. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "F-slurs like you are why guys like me can't have a girlfriend. I loved, name redacted, and you made her break up with me." I stared at him confused and said, "Dude, I never talked to her about breaking up with you. Just 'cause I'm gay doesn't mean I can make women leave their partners." I saw all the venom leave his face, and he seemed confused. I texted his ex-girlfriend and asked her to tell him that their breakup had nothing to do with me. So I went back for the next session thinking everything was cleared up. It wasn't. And I looked like Boo Boo the Fool showing up and greeting everyone like everything was okay. We started the session by arriving in a technological city with an anti-magic field. I don't fully remember how this happened, as it was years ago, but some dumb thing, a homebrew wild mage with a higher fail rate somehow released not 1, but 2 Tarrasques. I, as per usual, am useless in combat, as my level 3 team is just eaten, then they get to me. They eat me, but I don't take damage, and one chokes to death on me. When I escape its throat, I realize that the other has destroyed the world, and I am alone, with just a Tarrasque that will continually eat, digest, and let me pass through. Rinse, repeat for all eternity. Described in graphic detail 3 times. Campaign end. I asked him what the fuck that was, and he told me it was what I deserved, because it was my fault that he was alone, and that his ex thought he was a piece of shit, who was harassing me. I mean, he kinda was. He then said I was never allowed in a new campaign that he was running. I haven't played since, because it was honestly awful. My god, this DM is a special kind of stupid. No way that his girlfriend broke up with him because he was an asshole, no. It's because us gays have the superpower to control the minds of women and turn them against their boyfriends, because reasons. Not to mention that the fact that he forced OP to play a fairy queen was kind of a red flag in and of itself. I'm just hoping that this asshat didn't turn OP off from playing tabletop RPGs forever. Have you ever experienced a player or a GM that just made you go, what the fuck? If so, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. If you have a story that you'd like to be shared on the channel, feel free to post it in the comments, on the channel subreddit r/DnD Doge, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope you never have to experience a player or DM like the ones in these stories. Until next time.